Our guest today is all about high conflict. Wait, really? Well, if you've dealt with a high conflict personality in your blended family or anywhere really, you are going to want to listen to today's episode because our guest is going to give you some golden advice. I'm Cameron. I spent years building my career and creating a life I loved. And when my Prince Charming finally showed up, he had 4 kids in tow. Fast forward through lots of mistakes made and lessons learned, step-family life was much more complicated than I realized. If you're looking for help with blended family life, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Stepmom Diaries, where we keep it real as we dish about all the things. This is your weekly dose of blended family inspiration and encouragement. You're not the wicked stepmother, so let me help you find your fairy tale ending. Come on, let's do this. Welcome to the Stepmom Diaries. Today our guest is Megan Hunter, co-founder of the High Conflict Institute and Conflict Playbook, who, along with author and speaker Bill Eddy, developed the high conflict personality theory. Megan developed the concept of the High Conflict Institute after 13 years in policy, legislation, and judicial training with the Arizona Supreme Court, Administrative Office of the Courts, and the Dawes County Attorney's Office in Nebraska. She is also the founder of Unhooked Books Publishing. Megan has trained professionals across a wide spectrum of professions across the U.S. and 7 countries. She holds an MBA and a BS in Business and Economics. She has served as president of the Arizona chapter of the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts and the Arizona Family Support Council and the Nebraska Child Support Enforcement Association. She served 5 years on the Arizona Board of Psychologist Examiners, and she is the author and or co-author of several books, including Dating Radar, Hiring Radar, BIFF at Work, the High Conflict Co-Parenting Survival Guide. Megan is also a mom of 3, mother-in-law of 2, and stepmom of 5. So she is a busy woman. And she's also speaking at the Stepmom Summit in a couple of weeks. You can find out more about Megan and the summit in our show notes at thiscustomlife.com/episode 27. So let's dive in. This is going to be great. So Megan, hello. We're so glad that you're here.
Well, thank you. I'm so very happy to be on your podcast and grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've told the listeners a little bit about you, but I want to know what your stepmom story is, because in addition to being CEO of the High Conflict Institute, you're also a stepmom, which is awesome. So how did you meet your husband? And, tell us all the details.
All the good details. So I'll first say that I'm married in this here in August. I'll be married 15 years to my husband.
Happy anniversary. I don't know if that's like paper or leather or wood or what's the...
I'm sure it's got to be like diamonds, doesn't it? It's
got to be diamonds. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. So let's see, how did I meet him? So we met because my son and his nephew were best friends, and they were on a lacrosse team together. And I got to know his friends' parents at the lacrosse games, and the grandmas were also at the lacrosse games. My son's friends' grandmas, and they were like, this Megan gal is divorced, and our Paul is divorced. So we got invited to the family barbecues at the same time.
So it's like an old school setup.
It is.
I love it.
It is, exactly. So that's how we met, and we got married about a year and a half later, and I had 3 children, and he had 5. One of his was already out of college and living elsewhere, but when we got married, we had 7 teenagers, which was so exciting.
Wow, that's really jumping into the deep end.
Very, very. It's the deepest pool you could jump in, I think. So we had to buy a big house, and as any stepmom listening to this understands, it's like blending two different cultures from different parts of the planet when you bring in two different families who haven't spent a lot of time with each other. So in shopping for a house big enough to accommodate not only 9 people, but to accommodate two different cultures so that they didn't really tread on each other's territory too much was tricky. But we managed to somewhat accomplish it and kind of have their own bathrooms too, that kind of thing. So
and you made it out alive from the teenage years.
We made it out alive. And what's interesting is that some of it kind of went quickly because the ones that were close to college age, we got married in August, and one went off to, by the following January, like 6 months later, moved into a dorm, or 2 of them moved into dorms. So then we were down to 7. And then one didn't like us, so I think she moved out in October. So she was only there 3 months. We were down to 6. And 2 of them would go to their mom's house to stay. So those weeks we were just down to a few. And it kind of changed rapidly.
Well, I think all of the women listening to this are nodding their heads saying, oh my gosh, the balancing and the blending, I get it.
Yeah, because it's so much beyond our kids are in 4 different schools, and there's a lot of vehicles parked in the driveway, and who parks where, because they have to leave first in the morning, and there's just a lot of logistics to having that many kids, but just so much more that goes into blending a family that you don't know beforehand.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, so you are CEO of the High Conflict Institute, and your work with Bill Eddy and the Institute, I just can't tell you how important it is to blended families everywhere, because I know for me, the stepmoms that I work with, one of the top issues that I hear about from them is the difficulty that they have relating to, their partner's ex, and especially when it's a high conflict situation. And unfortunately, that's really, really common. So how did you decide to found the Institute? How did all of that come about? Was it out of your blended family experience, or, how did you and Bill come together to decide to do this?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story because it all sort of happened at the same time. I was the family law specialist at the Arizona Supreme Court, where we took, we did legislation and policy and judicial training, and I was the liaison between all of the different facets in the family law industry, which is a big industry. And, the mediators and the lawyers and the parents and the judges and everyone. And so my goal was always to just try to make the system better, because divorce is one of the worst things you can go through in life. Mm-hmm. And to get into a system that is 16 stop shopping is what I used to call it. It's just confusing, and a lot of it's unnecessary. And so it wasn't long being in that role that I realized that in family law, there was a common problem between everyone. And it's this thing called high conflict cases. And really the hallmarks of those were, they were very costly. They were very long and drawn out. They just were back in court all the time, fighting, arguing. And behind closed doors, the judges told me, look, we get blamed for everything in these cases, but we don't know what to do when there's allegations of domestic violence, of child abuse, of child sexual abuse. Who's lying? Who's telling the truth? We have to protect the kids. We have to protect the woman. But we don't know because we don't have the proof. In the other 80% of cases in the family court system, they're not getting those allegations. But in these cases, they were. And the common threads are they go on and on and on forever. Ultimately, they really damage their children. And so I kind of made it my, dog on a bone task to figure out if there is. So I researched, and worldwide there was this problem. And there's, hundreds, if not thousands of people working in family law. And they're all doing a good job, but no one's really figured out what to do with high conflict cases. So I just made it my mission to see if I could find someone who understood it. And I came across Bill Eddy. And he'd written this article called How Personality Disorders Drive Family Court Disputes. And I read it, had a light bulb moment, brought him to Arizona to train our family court judges. A lot of light bulb moments. I brought him back again to train custody evaluators and those really big custody battles, and thought I would have about 30 people show up, and I had to close the doors at 200.
Wow.
And it was every aspect of the family law arena. And I just knew at that time that everyone in the world who works with families in this way needs this training. So Bill and I started HCI back in 2006, and we've been training and going ever since.
Well, the work it really is so important, and some of the theories that he uses in terms of helping you deal with high conflict personalities, whether it's in a blended family or with an ex-spouse or, with a coworker or whatever, it's really, he gives some incredible advice. And, with some of the books that you guys have written, it's really wonderful. What is the most common? So you see a lot of these high conflict cases, and you obviously saw a lot in Arizona. What's the most common high conflict issue around blended families that you tend to see?
Well, so I'll give just a really brief bit about what is a high conflict personality. So we hear the term high conflict mostly in the divorce arena, but now it's expanding beyond into, like you said, workplace and things. What happened is, we're training divorce professionals how to deal with these high conflict cases. Well, it turns out that the people they're dealing with, this what we call someone with a high conflict personality, they also had jobs. And so they're kind of causing some problems at work sometimes, not always, but sometimes, yes. So the high conflict personality has a pattern of behavior, and they just kind of repeat the pattern. And I call it, now this is Megan speak, it's not an official diagnosis, or we're not diagnosing or labeling anyone. It's not in the DSM-5, but these are relationship disorders, because these are things that happen in interactions with other humans, right? As opposed to let's say, maybe bipolar or schizophrenia, they can cause relationship disruptions. However, it's the relationship itself, it's the interactions with a personality disorder that really cause a lot of these eruptions. And so some people, not all with personality disorders, and it's only 5 types, there's a subset of those that have this kind of externalizing set of behaviors. And it's just this pattern of repeating the all or nothing thinking, unmanaged emotions, extreme behaviors, and focusing on a target of blame. So I'm the victim. It's always someone else's fault. And to them, it truly feels that way. So if they can be at work, they can be in your neighborhood, they can be in your family, they can be, your spouse, they can be your child, they can be your sister, whatever. I think in a blended family, the setup it's a quick slide into the setup for having a high conflict situation, because, when you've had a divorce, you have some vulnerabilities, and there's some open exposures that allow someone with a high conflict personality who, conversely to the term high conflict, they'll often come in with charm. So they slide in with some charm, and we kind of get fooled, right? And there's no bad intent on their part. It's just their operating system. This is how they are wired. It's very normal and natural to them to be charming at first. And then when things don't go their way, the way they're wired is they disrupt. They get really angry. Their emotions are out of control. They act in extreme ways. They'll do things that 90% of other people would never do. They literally just don't stop themselves. So they're the ones writing the emails constantly, text message constantly, needing to feel connected, needing to feel superior, needing to feel dominating, whatever. And so in a blended family, there's a lot of jealousies that go on, particularly with the borderline personality, and a need to feel attached. So my quick scenario is to scuba diving. So if you go get trained in scuba, you learn that you dive with a buddy. You don't dive alone, because you may need help. And you have this extra air regulator. So if your buddy runs out of air, you can hand them your extra one and they can breathe long enough to get to the top. So with borderline personality, it's almost like they can't create their own air. They feel really empty. And so they're like, let's find someone that has air. And they find someone that will give them some air. So that's where that charm comes in. Okay, now I've got the air. But because of the disorder, and we won't go into all that, eventually they kind of sabotage the relationship. And somebody's going to cut off that air hose. Either the person with borderline or the other person, because they're like, I don't have any air left to give you. And it usually, is very, it finally implodes. Now, where's that person who needs the air, needs that oxygen? Where are they going to get the oxygen if it's cut off? Oh, let's attach it to the kids. I need to feel connected somewhere so I can get that oxygen. Okay, now the courts say, well, let's send the kids over to the other parent's house. This is before other parent is even married, right? Or has a new boyfriend or girlfriend. And, that's hard enough, because where am I going to get my air? So there can be lots of text messages and emails and maybe other little sabotages or something to get that air back. Now let's add in a new partner. All right. So now not only do I need that air, now that air may be attaching, that I really need, could be attaching to a new step parent. And so there's just some unconscious sabotaging that starts happening then on that other parent. And so I see a blended families that has, a high conflict other parent as just a petri dish for high conflict terribleness.
Yeah, I feel like everyone listening to this right now is nodding their head and just saying, yes, I know.
Yeah, it's one of the toughest spots to be in. And then you've got, a stepmom that just came into it having fallen in love. And I would say the majority of stepmoms want to do a good job being a step parent, but just have no idea what's coming if there's some high conflict issues involved on the other side. And often the dad is maybe a conflict avoider, or could be a fighter, and and willing to engage in battle, and then it's just kind of on. So in some of those cases, you're in court a lot, and dealing with all of these sabotaging issues within the home, right? And having a parent on the outside turn the kids against the stepmom. And it's hard, such a hard job in the world being a stepmom. Like I always said, as a stepmom, I finally realized that the day before I got married, I was revered as a mother. The day I got married and became a stepmother, I became a witch.
That's so true.
So you go from being revered to being a witch in a day. And it's a hard one to accept. So blended families are really hard for most people, I think. But when you have a high conflict personality involved, it's going to be the hardest thing you ever do, probably.
Yeah. So, talking about the high conflict personality or high conflict biomom, for a new stepmom who, as you said, I think most of us who get into the role, do so because we fell in love. We're just trying to do the best job possible, right? Like we're just trying to step in and deal with a situation where we realize that most of our life is now out of our control and, all these other factors and everything. So for the stepmom who finds herself smack dab in the middle of maybe an unexpected situation, maybe she didn't know that biomom was going to be high conflict when she, got together with her spouse. What's your advice for her? Because that can kind of overwhelm family life, and it can dominate your life if you're dealing with this very high conflict personality, even though they're not in your household. So what would be your piece of advice for the stepmom that has just joined a family and is realizing she's dealing with all this?
Well, if anyone who knew me 15 years ago heard me talking about this today, they'd say, well, why didn't you do that? I learned the hard way and I made a lot of mistakes. Because when you're dealing with a person with a high conflict personality, it's just a field of landmines, because it's a world of opposites and you don't know. You don't know going into it. So when you start to recognize these, sabotaging behaviors and things like that, the best advice I would have is go to a therapist. Like, I would even, if someone were listening to this who's not married yet, but is considering becoming a stepmom through marriage, I would say the couple should go find a good therapist who really understands blended families, or at least understands family systems and relationships, so you can have a plan going in. If you're already in it, and by the way, have the plan going in that both people agree to and understand, because as all you listeners really probably get, is that the other parent is going to have such a strong pull to protect their kids, and you're going to feel so left out and isolated. So if you can have a plan going in and then have check-ins and meet with a therapist once a month or something, I think it's a really, really solid idea.
And that's such a good point, to make sure that you're both on the same page on the plan. And whether that plan was made before you get together, which is ideal, or, you're a couple years into it going, oh my God, how do I handle all this? Then you sit down and come up with the plan, but sort of making sure that both of you are on the same page and that you get your spouse's buy-in, because without that, then it's going to be really difficult to navigate.
Yeah, there's just so many unknowns, because it's not like just getting married without children. You're just dealing with so many dynamics and personalities. And I know in my case, they were all teenagers. So it's very different, as you know, based on the ages of the children when you get married. And I think the older they are, you would think it would be easier just because they have more life experience, but it's often harder because they have more life experience. So if you're already into it and you're struggling, but it's not too bad and you can manage, go get a therapist yourself and just get some guidance and direction. If you think you're dealing with a high conflict situation, you really need to understand the high conflict personality. You need to either read a book or take a training or something. And I mean, it's you have to understand what to do differently, because what you do with everyone else, you do the opposite with. If you want success, you have to do the opposite with someone with a high conflict personality. So an example of that would be, they need to feel like they're in charge. And so you just be friendly to that person and let them know you're in charge. Let them know they're in charge, right? If they say something rude, instead of engaging with them, you give them back an ear statement, which is a statement that contains empathy, attention, or respect, or all three. And what that does is puts the fire out in their brain. To put it is like simply, what we typically do is try to explain ourselves, defend ourselves, argue, or if you're a real conflict avoider, you just say nothing at all and let them roll all over you. But if you do engage, if you have to respond to something, you start it with an ear statement. Oh, that does sound really hard. Let's see if we can figure this out. What options have you tried?
Yeah, that's so important. That actually segues perfectly into my next question, which is, the big misconception, or I guess mistake, even when it's an unknowing mistake that stepmoms and their spouses make in dealing with these high conflict personalities, is engaging with them as if you can actually have a rational discussion and, kind of exchange points of view and convince them of your point of view, which that's just not the case. And you guys have done a lot of work to talk to people about how to communicate with these personalities. And I know that one of the the things in addition to the ear is the BIFF. We've got
Yes.
all these acronyms, right? So tell us a little bit about the BIFF method, because I find it so interesting, along the lines of the expressing empathy and trying to kind of put them off their, take them off their guard. Tell me a little bit about BIFF and how that works for stepmoms to engage.
You bet. So, really, when you're dealing with a high conflict personality, your communication method must change. And so, as we just discussed, for verbal communication, you want to use ear. For written communication, you want to use BIFF. So BIFF stands for brief, informative, friendly, and firm. So let's say you get an email from the other parent, the bio mom, and excuse me, and it's just another blame. And it's usually, we all know how those feel when we get that zinger email. And it's typically filled with one of those 4 things we already talked about: unmanaged emotions, blame, extreme behaviors, or all or nothing thinking. Either, you do this or I'm going to do this. I'm done.
And I'm guessing that most people's first instinct is to respond back with, no, you're wrong, and here's why.
Exactly. And then they go to court with, a string of 6,000 or 20,000 or 100,000 emails or text messages. So to stop that, to contain that, you use BIFF. And so let's say you write your email. You decide first if you need to respond. Sometimes what you have to understand about the high conflict personality is that there's just a lot of junk in the reacting part of they're just very reactive people. And there's a lot of yuck stored up in that part of the brain. And they have a lack of impulse control. And this operating system drives them to just get it out. So they get it out now because they're highly anxious until they get it out. Now they've just typed it out to you in an email or a text. And now their anxiety has come down. And guess what happens when you read it? Your anxiety goes up. So now it's on your plate, it's on your shoulders, and you're pissed and blamed again, and you just type something off, and it's on, right? The war is on. And they'll come back and come back and come back and come back. So if you're really interested in stopping that, some people are, some people aren't. If you are one who is interested in stopping that, use the BIFF approach. So you can go ahead and write it out, write the email, write the text, whatever. Let me circle back, sorry. Back to they've just got to get it out, and they don't stop themselves. Then they feel better, you feel worse, but you still may not need to respond because it may not really have any meaning to it. Mm-hmm. And they just needed to get it out because they're angry in that moment. Unmanaged emotions, and they've forgotten about it. And then you go and sit on it for 3 days, lose sleep over it, right? So if you decide you need to respond, like it's about an exchange or when the kids are, whatever, you write the email and then you ask these 4 questions. Is it brief? So is it 2 to 5 sentences? If it's more, you've got to cross out unnecessary stuff. And you do that by then asking, is it informative? So you remove anything that's defending yourself against any blames that have been made. Just stick to straight information. Okay, so that'll get rid of more. And then ask yourself, is it friendly? Meaning, like if it's an email, hi, Sally. All right, and then closing, like, have a nice day, whatever. Yeah. But just so it's not snotty and snitty and maybe too sterile or whatever, just a friendly tone. And then firm, meaning you don't really leave it open-ended unless there's a question to be asked. And if there is, like, well, is it okay to drop the kids off at 7 o'clock or 5 o'clock? And you do that, you give 2 options or more so that you keep the person thinking and have something to respond to that's solid instead of just going off on more tangents. And BIFF has become what we're really known for at High Conflict Institute. In addition to being experts in what we do, but BIFF is our thing. It's kind of our jam. And it because it works. People love BIFF.
Yeah, it does work. And it's also hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to sort of change your mindset, especially if you've been in it for a while and are sort of used to the going back and forth and the high anxiety. I mean, it's sort of hard to get a nasty email and then kind of hit stop and say, okay, do I need to respond to this? yes or no, you know what I mean? And kind of take a more intentional approach around your response. It's hard.
Yeah, it is. It is a really hard thing to stop yourself, and what we call is getting emotionally unhooked. So you just got to make sure you're unhooked, and it's really one of the hardest things you can do as a stepmom, because you're just so in the thick of it. There's just so many dynamics. But if you stick to structure, and BIFF is a structure, it's going to give you peace, it's going to give you less stress, and it's going to give you confidence. And as you use it over time, you'll see a change in the relationship, because what a BIFF does is calms and contains conflict, because it calms the person on the other side. This is a person who has zero trust in other people, and they're always in defense mode, unless they're in charm mode at the beginning, but mostly defensive mode, which is where all the blame and all that comes from. And so when they feel something that doesn't cause those anxiety spikes, they feel better. And over the long term, it may have a calming effect on them.
So, in terms of, we've talked a lot about sort of how stepmoms can deal with high conflict personalities, and if you've got a bio mom that's high conflict, but what misconceptions do we have about people with high conflict personalities? It is hard to develop empathy for someone who is, spewing a lot of negativity and nastiness your way, but what are we maybe not understanding about them?
That's a great question, because I think one of the biggest misunderstandings is that they think they know that they're doing this on purpose, that they're behaving badly on purpose. But I'm here to tell you they're not. This is absolutely their operating system. And the hard part is that they don't come with a sign saying, I'm going to make your life really difficult, right?
It'd be a lot easier if they did.
Yes, it would. So I'll give you a tiny brief story. I call the Jana story. And Jana's someone who is diagnosed with, and it's made up name, diagnosed with schizotypal, like she has paranoid delusions and that kind of thing, right? So about a minute in a conversation with her, when you've just met her, you're like, something's a little off here. And you listen a little bit further and there's something not quite right here. So what do? Do you keep saying, oh, well, no, your delusions aren't real, or no, you stop and you adapt how you deal with her. The problem now, if we switch to high conflict people, is you don't have that minute or two where you go, something's different. Because instead you're getting some charm, or you're just getting really normal. So it can take up to 6 months or a year to see some of the things, these behaviors, depending on how much interaction you have. And if you don't know what to look for, like listening to their words, they'll tell you exactly who they are. There's lots of training around that in, your own emotions and things like that. But that is the biggest misconception, is that they're doing this on purpose, and they know what they're doing. And so you could test it out. I don't recommend this, but if you were to say to someone like this that, you have a high conflict personality, or you have borderline personality disorder, or you have
you're a narcissist, like that would go well.
It doesn't go well for anyone. And so they're like, what are you talking about? No, you're the one. Because this is the stuff in the brain, and it's so powerful. It's all run by feelings and a fear of feeling a certain way. And when they feel that way, they've got to get back to feeling okay, their default safety state, like we all do. And so they do what it takes to get back there. If that means screaming at someone, sending that nasty email, they just don't stop themselves. And to them, it feels entirely necessary and to feel okay again, and entirely normal.
And so you should not expect an apology anytime soon. And you should move forward and try to reconcile that that's just not going to happen.
Right. And it's you're right. You kind of have to quit being a right fighter. You have to sign up for that. And just think of Jana. Would you try to fight with Jana? Or would you
It's a
adapt
great
what you're
analogy.
doing? You have to adapt what you're doing and learn a new way, and then be disciplined enough to do it, and realize that you also have an amygdala in your brain that's going to get you hooked into their emotions sometimes. And that's when you really have to be disciplined and not reacting.
Yeah, absolutely. This is some gold right here. I mean, this is just a really great discussion. You're speaking this month at our Stepmom Summit, August 26th to 28th. And I'm so excited for the women attending our virtual summit to hear what you have to say, because I think that this issue is just such an important one for stepmoms. And you're going to be speaking about identifying and reducing step family threats. So without giving too much away, give us a little bit of a sneak peek about what we're going to learn from you in a couple of weeks.
You bet. So I'll go over, a bit about what is this high conflict personality and the brain science behind it, and how the brains interact between all of the people involved in the blended family. And then I'll give some tips on, how to do things differently. There's some key skills that we all need to know if we're going to turn this thing around. And then I'll really apply it to the blended family, and for the stepmom to understand how to reduce the threat level to the outside parent. I made up that term. I don't know if that's a good term, but the bio mom. Because it's in a blended family, there's just so many threats because it's different cultures, and so I'll give you everyone some tips on how to reduce those threats. And it really is within our power to do that. We just don't know that we needed to, and how to do it. So once we know those things, then it can be a lot easier to reduce or eliminate the threats. And that should bring down the stress and the conflict. So it'll just be little things like that, and kind of how to avoid escalating the conflict, and what to do if you have a husband who's a conflict avoider maybe, and you kind of feel like you're out there winging it by yourself, and that kind of thing. So that's a kind of an overview.
Oh, I cannot wait. I think that this is just going to be such an amazing discussion with our summit attendees, and information that I think a lot of them will be really excited to get.
I hope so.
So, and if you want to get free tickets to the virtual summit, you can go to thestepmomsummit.com, and I'll put all the links in our show notes, which will be thiscustomlife.com/episode 27. Before we wrap, I always like to ask a fun question. So, and I always ask the same one because I'm very curious what people are doing. What are you binge watching these days, Megan?
Well, I will say that I am working on my PhD in reality television, and have been for
I'm right there with you.
10 years.
I think I'm pretty close.
And people think it's just for the drama, but it's really, it's an interesting take on human behavior. Some of it's scripted, but when you have a high conflict personality in the cast, they can't stop themselves. So you're going to see the behaviors and how people react. So that's interesting. Anyway, all that to say, right now my favorite is 90 Day Fiancé, any version of it. I love 90 Day Fiancé. And I'm watching The Chosen as well. I love The Chosen. So that's what I'm binging.
Oh, fun. Yeah, the reality shows must be like research gold for you with the high conflict personalities.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they are. It's, and I tell people, go watch this one or that one, and you'll, take a piece of paper and put lines
this is
down
what I'm
it,
talking
tick
about.
the boxes. Yeah.
Yeah,
if
totally.
you see all or nothing thinking, tick a box. And if you or 10 or more on any column, yeah.
I love it. Totally. Well, so Megan, tell us where we can find you.
So our website is highconflictinstitute.com, and that is a website that kind of has everything on it, but you'll find a link to our second website that's specifically been created just for individuals. Instead of professional training or something, it's online courses to learn how to do BIFF, to learn how to do EAR and all of those. And it's a little bit of work in progress, but it's called conflictplaybook.com.
Great. Well, I'll link to both of those in the show notes, which again will be at thiscustomlife.com/episode 27. Megan, thank you so much. This was so interesting and, something that I think so many stepmoms really don't know how to deal with. And so you're really providing valuable services out there. And so thank you for that. And thank you for being here today. This was really fun.
Thanks. It was my pleasure. And I think some of it is being a stepmom for 15 years. It's my turn to give back to the stepmom community.
Exactly. I love it.
So thank you for having me.
Well, good. We'll see you at the summit in a couple of weeks.
I look forward to it.
That's it for this week. If you've enjoyed our chat, I hope you'll help spread the word. Share this episode with friends and head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and leave me a review. And don't forget, for more great stepmom content, head on over to thiscustomlife.com and follow me on social media. Just search This Custom Life on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. Until next time, you keep being you and know that we are in this together. See you here next week.